Assalamu alaikum everyone. I hope you guys are doing amazing. Welcome back to a brand new episode in a new series. So this series is going to be a little mini series on this book that I'm currently reading called Disturber of the Hearts by Ibn al-Jawzi. It is definitely a hard read. It's not a light book. I think that there are some pages that you should be rereading that really get a message across that are really helpful, and it lives up to the title's name for sure. I think that it's not an easy series, it's not like an easy read, but I think that it is something that should be shared and should be talked about. I feel like at times we live in a bubble of, hope and beautifulness and rainbows, and it's always good to have a good hope in Allah, but it's also good to have a good healthy fear in Allah and remember who you're worshiping. So I felt like this book really put that alive in my heart, and I wanted to share some pages with you guys. I want to say a few things before I begin. One, I'm not sharing the entire book, nor am I sharing an importance of order or what I think is more significant in the other. I'm just sharing random pages that I think would be nice to talk about. Number two, I highly encourage everyone to get this book for themselves and read it. It is a heavy read, and like I said, it's not necessarily easy, but it is something, again, you get a small dosage of, and you think about it, and you think about it a good bit, because having that healthy fear in Allah is equivalently important in remembering who we worship and what Allah is capable of doing, because a lot of times we just live and think about the good, but we forget that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is also very powerful in what He does. I pray that everything I share testifies goodness for me, and Allah makes us among those that go to Jannah. Ameen. Some of these pages, like I said, are really heavy, so we'll start off a little bit in the beginning. And this one talks about how the majority of the sinners rely on the mercy of Allah. You should know that the majority of the wrongdoers and sinners rely on the mercy, the forgiveness, and the generosity of Allah, while at the same time neglecting and overlooking His severe punishment. This biased understanding occurred to them because they wrongly assumed the mercy of Allah is like tenderness. This wrong conclusion was also derived because they liken the mercy of Allah to the mercy of the creation, as they think it is similar to how when a person witnesses his enemy being tortured, he condoles with him, and hence his heart will be soft towards him, while in fact the mercy of Allah is absolutely not of this kind. As for he who seeks forgiveness while still insisting on committing sins, then indeed he is like a stubborn person ignoring all the warnings. There's a quote at the bottom of the page that says, "Hoping to receive the mercy of the one who you insist on being disobedient to is kind of betrayal and foolishness." Further to the point, when knowing that the intercession of Ibrahim, the intimate friend of Allah, for his father will be unaccepted, and the request of the Messenger of Allah, peace and blessings be upon him, that Allah forgives his mother, is also unaccepted, should make the regular person always in a constant state of worry and fear. This is the meaning that Al-Hasan referred to in his statement when he was asked, "Why do you weep for such long extended periods of time?" He replied, "I fear that Allah will throw me into hell, and He does not care." Another point is that a person might be punished for sins he may belittle. Therefore, it is necessary to start off with immediate intimidation in order to ward off sins before they are committed, and hence a person can avoid the punishment. That's the first one that I'm going to share with you, and I wanted to start off with this one because I think that it is really important, especially in this month of Ramadan. I know that Ramadan is a time where a lot of people, leave sins and they leave the things that they're very used to doing. It's a lifestyle change. And of course, you guys always hear the discussions before Ramadan and after Ramadan, where it's, before Ramadan, it's what can we do to become the best Muslim? What are our goals? What are we intending on dropping? What are we intending on adding? How am I intending on leaving music? How am I intending on putting on the hijab? Then near the end of Ramadan, our discussions become, how can I keep this feeling that I have alive inside of me? What can I do to keep this momentum within me going? And of course, there are habits and ways that you can keep the things that you did in Ramadan outside, which of course, like I always say, is by keeping them linear. So if you do a little thing, keep it linear. If you stop listening to music, don't just start because Ramadan ended. Now, of course, there was an imam who used to say this thing all the time. I follow him on Instagram, and he always says this around every Ramadan. He's like, a lot of times people ask me in Q&As, how can I get that same feeling in Ramadan throughout the year? And you can't necessarily. You can't replicate that exact same feeling because the month of Ramadan is a special month for that reason. The month of Ramadan is the most special month we have. And this is when Allah's mercy is out there. This is when we are all turning to Him. This is when every single good deed is, rewarded on a higher scale than ever before. We are trying to complete reading the Quran. People are trying to do khatams of the Quran. Like, there's just so much more, focus on our reasoning of being made, of purpose, which was to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And of course, those actions, those things that we do, that should continue. But that, I guess you could say how he says it, is like that sweetness of Iman in Ramadan. That's something you experience in Ramadan, but that doesn't mean you can't have a similar feeling outside. But a lot of times people want this exact dicto copy feeling in Ramadan, and when they don't get it, they feel discouraged. The thing is, the sweetness of Iman is something you can feel throughout, if you allow yourself to. Ramadan is a special month. Of course, what you feel in Ramadan, the closeness, the feelings you get when you pray Taraweeh, like, those are things that you're gonna get in Ramadan. But that doesn't mean that outside of Ramadan, you can't still have a feeling that brings you closeness to Allah. Now, the problem with feelings and, discussing these types of things, and I always like to say this, is that we don't worship feelings, right? We worship Allah. So if you're not having a feeling when you pray, that doesn't mean you stop praying. That just means you continue to pray. The way that I see it is that every one prayer is leading me closer to another prayer of deeper khushu and deeper connection with Allah. But you got to do this one prayer to get closer to the next one. You know what I'm saying? So it's like every single thing that you do, whether you feel like you are completely immersed in it or not, is something you have to do. It is an obligation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for you to be praying, whether you feel like it or not. We don't worship feelings, and a lot of times in Ramadan people get a little bit intertwined in feelings, and we forget that this is the month where there is so much reward out there that, put your feelings aside for a second. This is a time where you can build your home in the Akhirat and do amazing things, not just for yourself in this life, but inshallah in the next. And I feel like that's important to mention because, like I said, this is the month where people leave sins. And when you leave a sin, you realize how much better your life is when you left it. You will always, always, always hear a person who left music tell you how amazing their life is post-music. Like maybe the first 4 or 5 months, they'll be like, oh, it's hard, I slip up. But once you leave music, it's like your mind and your life just opens up in insane ways. And I've heard this from plenty of people. I'm telling you, it works. The people that have left haram relationships, people that have cut off communication with people, during Ramadan, it might be hard in the beginning, but then you learn to love Allah who has made you, and you learn to have a better relationship with Him outside of, what you might have had on a usual basis. What you develop here is what you want to take out there and learn to nurture it and take care of it and raise it throughout the year and have it as something that you continue to do. So the habit that you I guess you could say, quote, quote, gave birth to in Ramadan, of this is the habit that I'm going to start doing of leaving this haram relationship. Let's nourish this habit. Let's raise this habit. Let's grow this habit outside of Ramadan. But when we take sins, we look at sins and we undermine them, or we say that it's not that deep or it's not that big, or this is just for Ramadan, you're putting a bracket on how you decide to view a sin. And while we're talking about this, if any of you guys have ever read the book Kitab al-Hikam, great book, has amazing hikmahs in there. There's this one hikmah that always comes to my mind. That's my personal favorite. It's number 3. It is, do not get caught up in what is a major sin or a minor sin. Just focus on pleasing Allah. There is no minor sin when His justice confronts you, and there is no major sin when His grace is upon you. I like this one a lot. A lot of times when we talk about sins, I've mentioned this before, people categorize them in major and minor. And this concept of categorizing sins, yes, it does come in hadith and Quran ayahs where we talk about how there's, to avoid major sins. We talk about these things, but the whole purpose of this discussion of grouping sins, it was meant to be something for an academic purpose. It was not meant to be something that you use to belittle a sin. And too many times people use this, this category, these categories that were made for an academic purpose in their own life to belittle a certain sin. And that's not how it works. When you see a sin, and this is obviously, reminder for me first before anybody, when you see a sin, you shouldn't think to yourself, how big of a dent will this make in my life? You should just see it as, that's a sin, I can't do that. You shouldn't look at it, this is major or minor, or what will happen if I do this. You should just look at it as, that's a sin, and I should stay away from that. The more you justify it in your mind, the harder it becomes to not do it. When you're justifying something that's not that deep, the more likely you are to do it. And I feel like this was a good starting point, especially in this month, because what you cultivate and make in the month of Ramadan is what you want to cultivate and be when you're out, right? The person that I am in Ramadan is someone that I want to try to take with me out linear and through. This is not something that I want to leave in, March or April. This is something that I want to take with me throughout and throughout. And the way that you do that, of course, is by taking those, small goals, small things that you want to do, taking your time on them, but also reducing this idea, and honestly, just in my opinion, eliminating the idea of what you used to do before and who you were before, because this is a time where you can restart, get that new page in your life. And if you're leaving so many things before, when Ramadan comes to an end, don't sit there and think, well, before Ramadan I had a relationship and I was drinking and I was whatever, so when Ramadan ends I'm going to do that. No, you're going to enter Ramadan with this firm intention that I'm not going to be doing those things when I leave it. And inshallah, Allah will help you with that. And as it said in the book, one more thing that I want to touch on, heavy reminder that the prophets, peace and blessings be upon all of them, the best creations, better than any other human beings that were made in any time, they will not be, getting their way on the Day of Judgment. They won't be getting the chance to just intercede for whoever, or save whoever, save their mother, save their father, save their family member. That won't happen for them. And they are the most pious. So when it comes down to me and you, we should kind of have a more stricter eye and a more stricter standard, because me and you are not prophets. We're none of those things. So it's not in our benefit to look at these things and categorize them and think that you can get away with them. It's not in our benefit. Anyway, I hope this kind of made sense. That was my reflection on when I read this specific page. Inshallah, I will try my best to upload more of these throughout the month. Please take care of yourself. Have a great rest of your day. Assalamu alaikum.